welcome to the first episode of FinCrime Insiders. I'm your host, Skylar Palmer, and I'm here with my partner, Lauren Schaefer, our special guest,
Hello.
Tanya Nowicki.
Hello.
Today, we're going to be talking about all things financial crimes compliance. We'll be asking Tanya 5 questions about herself and her experiences in the field, and we're excited to hear her insights. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone watching or listening that the views and opinions expressed on FinCrime Insiders are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of their past, current, or future employers. Any content provided by our webcast hosts or participants are of their opinion and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, or anyone or anything. Now, without further ado, let's get this started. How's everybody feeling today?
Good.
Good,
How are you
good.
guys?
Doing good. I'm a little nervous, but I think this will work out how I envision it. Otherwise, we may be just publicized all over YouTube and embarrassed, but it's okay.
At least we always have an experience out of this.
Exactly. You can put it on your resume if you will. All right, awesome. Well, go ahead, Lauren. Let's go ahead get this started.
All right. So, Catherine, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your job title?
Yeah, so I am a financial crime specialist with a well-known large banking institution. And I actually go by Tanya, so sorry. Catherine is my legal name, but I go by Tanya as a nickname.
Oh, that's great. And what's your scope of responsibilities or like the structure of your team?
So our team consists of about 7 analysts. We mainly just focus on anti-money laundering investigations. Sometimes there's some fraud that we get, but it's just mainly AML.
Great.
Awesome. So when you say it's just 7 analysts of you, is that just your team, and then there's another team that may be doing the similar things? That's another 7 analysts, or?
Yeah, so our team consists of 7, but there's, I believe, 3 other teams in our Arizona office, and there should be 10 of us, but our team is fairly new. So we kind of just grabbed from the other teams and made a new team. And some people left, so that's why we're just 7 instead of 10.
Okay. So you were part of a different team then, along with a few others, and then they broke off and made it to 3. So there was like a promotion, like a manager was created to fill like a 3rd team.
Yeah, correct.
We're pretty familiar with that.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, it's nice to meet you. Thanks for coming on the show today and being the honorary guest of FinCrime Insiders, actually. So hopefully when this gets published, we'll get a lot more momentum behind it and more intrigue and everything. So greatly appreciative. You are the trendsetter. So hopefully this works out in your favor and all our favors and everybody in the financial crime compliance space.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. All right, so yeah, the next question, we just want to discuss a little bit if there's any trends or something specific that you're noticing more prevalent. It could be yourself or something amongst your team or just at your your institution as a whole, or something that maybe you guys are all focusing on.
Yeah, so our caseload varies. So we don't just focus on a specific set of cases or individuals or entities. Our caseload has entities and individuals and a wide variety of scenarios like Zelle portfolio reviews. We have Visa portfolio reviews and CTR evasion, elder financial abuse, the
Okay.
occasional
So
wires, and
you then you deal with the deposit and like credit, or is it just the deposit?
it's a lot of things. So we do deposit. Um, we also sometimes do like mortgage fraud.
Oh, yeah.
So it varies just by week or by case, really, because there are certain periods of within a month or two that we'll just get at least 15 Zelle cases in a row.
Yeah.
And then the next week we can get CTRs, EFEs. It just really depends.
Okay. So Lauren, I'm thinking so it sounds like, and Tanya, correct me, but so you're not triaging any alerts then, no?
No.
That's a separate team within the FCC.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, right on. And you're dealing with a variety of investigations, um, which is pretty common. Now, do you know, like what the other teams do? Is it similar to you, or are they more specific, or are those other teams like the alert team, the investigation team, the SAR team?
Now, all people in our Phoenix office, the four teams that are in the Phoenix office, we all do the same thing. It's just since there's so many of us, we're just broken into 4 different teams
Yeah,
in our location.
that makes sense. And are you the actual SAR filer, or are you the SAR recommender?
We do the SAR filing, so we
Okay.
get the alert and work the case from start to finish.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Right on. Because I've had experiences where like it's super structured, right? You have alert triage, and then you have a case investigation, and then the case investigation will either clear that case, close it out, or they'll recommend it for SAR, and then that SAR investigator, takes everything up to that point, with a grain of salt, but then they still kind of attack it with their own perspective, and then they're actually the determination of whether or not to file that SAR. Is that similar to what you're doing, or I guess you kind of just said that you get the case, and then it's up to you to either discontinue it, no, you close it out, or yeah, do the SAR.
Yeah, so we disposition the cases as a no SAR or a SAR.
Gotcha. Okay, right on. Lauren, any commentary?
No, just interesting to hear how it's set up, since Skylar and I have sort of talked about this, how so many different institutions are somewhat similar, but some are more structured of like each designated team for like what we've heard before of like cases, and then a designated SAR filer. So neat to hear how you guys do it.
Yeah. And actually, yeah, to specify, I suppose, you're a large, well-known institution. It would be classified more as retail, correct?
We do both.
Yeah, I mean, it's a large perspective. I mean, obviously a large amount of deposits and whatnot. But I'm picturing in my head more retail. I don't know, because in our perspective, right, we come from a commercial banking, like primarily business banking.
Mhm.
So we don't. A lot of our customers are pretty vetted, due diligence, from traditional CIP all the way up to enhanced due diligence most of the time. So uh, if that I have no recollection, but if I'm picturing it right in my head, I feel like that you may get a good mix. But would you say it's more business or more personal?
I would say it's more personal, since we do both, um, we also do commercial
Yeah,
in our banking institution as well.
yeah,
So retail and commercial. So we do get a fair mix. But I think mainly it's I want to say it feels like 75 is retail,
Okay.
the other 25 is commercial.
Yeah, that's kind of what I picture in my head. I don't know. Maybe one day I'll experience it, but until then, that's kind of what I envision from what I know thus far to this point in my career. But all right, awesome. That's great. Good to understand. What you're experiencing in your current role, and what goes on at an institution of your size and structure. So thanks for indulging us there.
Yeah.
All right, the next question we have for you is, do you have any investigations or, I guess scenario alert wouldn't apply to you because we just disclosed that, but, an interesting investigation that you'd like to give us in more detail, as much information as you can. That's kind of the whole point of this, FinCrime Insiders, right? Is we're trying to get as close to the real thing as we can, discussing these types of investigations and, without, giving up customer information, things like that. But this question was actually added to this show because of our pre-call, right? You brought up that you would be, you think that'd be a good topic to discuss as something that somebody's worked on that they think is really, interesting or unique or just cool, really.
Yeah, so I don't even remember when it was. I'm gonna say about 6 months ago, I worked on a really big healthcare fraud case. It took me about a week to do. And I kind of rushed through it because I was going on vacation the next week. So I only had a week to do it. So I got the alert. It was for a 90-day review for cash withdrawals indicative of CTR evasion.
Now
So when
this
I
is
looked at
sorry, just to specify. So this is a not like a systems alert. This is like a 90-day review type alert that's generated. So like a
Yes.
SAR has already been filed.
Right, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yep.
Yeah, so it was for a 90-day CTR evasion case. So when I looked into it, and it was for a business account. So I looked at the business. I couldn't really find them online. Nothing legitimate. So that was the first red flag. And then when I looked at the transactional review, that's when it got interesting. The business was a marketing business, and they were receiving a lot of checks from customers. And they were healthcare companies, but they were not legitimate. I couldn't find them in line, and their activity and their accounts were not commensurate with healthcare, like a healthcare business. There was no other incoming credits from like clients or anything like that. There was just federal like healthcare claim payouts in their accounts.
Now those
And
payments, were they what you said? You said they were checks, correct?
so in the healthcare businesses, it was ACHs that were
Okay,
coming in from the government,
gotcha.
and they were going out via check or cash withdrawal. And all the checks, all the outgoing checks in those accounts kind of interconnected with all the other accounts that I was seeing. So it was just kind of going around in a big old circle. And then in my alerted account is where all the cash was withdrawn from.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And they were CTR evading. So I actually extended my review back to the beginning of the first 90-day case, because the last analyst only focused on the cash and didn't focus on the checks.
Yeah.
So I had to go back and I had to pull all those checks in to my review. And then I went up to current review. So I looked at almost, I think, about a year's worth of activity. And it ended up being $5.5 million that I found suspicious.
Which was about how long?
Time frame wise, about a year.
Oh, wow.
So I'm trying to think. So now, what do you think they were doing? They were making claims, healthcare claims, like for people, or
Yeah, I think so. None of the claims had any like names on them, but I think they might have been making up clients and then billing the government and then receiving those funds. I did see some like other banking cashier's checks that were deposited into those accounts. So I think that those other institutions also suspected healthcare fraud. So
yeah,
they closed those accounts. So after I filed the SAR, I also recommended all those clients and all those businesses to be exited from our bank. So that was fun. There was about 30 different individuals and businesses and about 30 different accounts as well.
yeah, okay. Were any of them like same signers, or they were all different signers, or were they all formed by the same business registry or anything like that?
They were, some of the businesses were the same signers, but they were all, they all had similar names. So I don't know if they were family members or if they were like friends, but they kind of, all, they were all in it together.
Yeah, yeah. There's in this profession, right? We're not kicking in doors or anything like that. So we only have the opportunity to report on what we're seeing. But the other side of it, I'm sure you discussed with your colleagues, right? But a lot of times we like discuss amongst each other too. Is we're like, man, either it's my conspiracy theory or what my interpretation of what's going on behind the scenes. And then it'd be awesome if you saw on the news it was a giant healthcare fraud type thing, and you're like, oh yeah, as a part of that that crackdown or something like that. But so that's definitely interesting. um it the red flags you said are pretty common, and those are things to look out for. And I mean, the structure of the reviews and stuff like that. So it's interesting that you point out. So you guys will review different 90 days. So a different investigator could have, reviewed the previous 90-day, and then it just gets auto populated to somebody else the next time it comes up in queue.
Yeah, so what used to happen is we got our own 90 days, but that was getting, people were not doing it correctly. So sometimes they would just either just file the SAR again, just in case, or they would just, no SAR it because they didn't feel like doing it. So now we're not technically supposed to do our 90-day reviews anymore.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's better that way because, so the prior analysts probably thought it was suspicious. That's why they filed. But when I look at the activity, I could have a different perception of that activity I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Either it's not suspicious or it still is suspicious.
I agree.
Yeah,
I think it's
definitely.
good to have a second set of eyes, especially like when you've already done the entire like duration of the case and then you filed, and then if you relook at it, you occasionally are gonna like see something differently, or you may still just go into it with like the same rose-colored glasses of what that case looks like to you. So that's an interesting way that you guys do that.
Yeah, I too agree that it's nice to have a different eyes on it. Especially, I mean, a few times in a row, that's fine. I feel like, but if it's still continually like the similar activity, and maybe you've conducted 2 90-day reviews already, and you were actually the original SAR filer, so you've done this 3 times, right? Um, and maybe you just get somebody else to look at it, and maybe just confirm that, hey, this is, yeah, I am right, to continue to file on this, or maybe maybe you're missing something, right? Because sometimes in this industry we do a defensive filing, right? It's kind of just like, I'm unsure of this, but it doesn't seem to add up currently with all the information available. So then you're going to file it, right? Because we have deadlines to meet and things like that. And we continually have these deadlines to meet. So maybe the next time you come up on it and you still didn't get enough time to look at it, maybe, and you still have questions, or you didn't get a response from that RFI, or you sent a 314B and didn't hear back either. So you're still kind of up in the air, or you're about it, but you're not trying to continually file these things, right? If it's not necessary, of course. So that's when I think just getting another pair of eyes on it, and then also just like from my perspective, and my history is that I think that more so with like high risk type things too, is that like we look at high risk activity more scrutiny, but like a lot of times it's just to make sure that they're staying within the bounds of their high risk industry, right? But if you continually look at that and you're like, yep, everything checks, then you can kind of get so hyper focused, or that lose that investigative side or perspective of it, and then you forget to look holistically again, and that could easily deter an investigator from identifying maybe other red flags like you noticed for that healthcare.
Yeah, there's a lot of times when I get 90-day reviews where I look at the prior activity, I'm like, that shouldn't have been a SAR. So I normally no SAR. And I think right now I have a pretty high no SAR rate, because I just feel like I can justify the no SAR,
Yeah.
or the activity shouldn't have been SAR'd on anyway in the
Yeah.
first place. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I'm sure you're working extreme volumes too, so that probably plays a factor into the amount of activity that's being reported, which it probably will come up into the conversation later on. So I'll hold my thoughts on that, but we'll go ahead and move on to the next question here, and hopefully be able to circle back to what I was thinking. But so yeah. In regard to your experience, this kind of plays into just what we've been talking about, but what issues or obstacles have been like impacting you, your team, your institution, the most in regard to your ability to just do your day-to-day responsibilities, whether it's SAR filings or dispositioning cases. If you can speak a little bit to that, maybe it's relevant to the size of your institution, or the structure of your team, or something like that. But I'm curious to hear if anything like that is impacting you.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is probably our case management system. It's kind of outdated anyway, and we're in the my bank is thinking of transitioning to another case management system, but it won't be implemented for probably another year or so. But in the meantime, every 10 minutes, we get logged out of our case management system. And so it's really frustrating to have to re-sign in every time. So that does slow you down. And, certain times of the day, it's really slow. Or you can't get into the right server. It just won't allow you. So you have to try multiple times to log in. And I think, some of the other like systems we use within our bank to look up customer information or customer transactions, sometimes those are also slow, or you can't log in because they're having an issue. But I think those are, the major things.
Yeah, which I'm pretty sure is common across the industry. The banks are a lot of banks are pretty dated just as whole, right? They've been around for a long time, so integral parts of that institution. All that customer data is on this one founding, database that it's like it'd be very difficult to move all that data into something more up to date or something like that. So they kind of build off of it, right? And they have all these different methods of using different products and databases to maneuver. But at the heart of it, you still have that one integral banking system that houses all of the customer data, and it probably has transactions in there too, but you don't actually ever go to it, because looking at transactions in that database, it would be hurt your eyes, your brain. You can't really sort through it very easily or nicely, right? So the case management system, it times out. So what are you doing in that, like, that requires you to be in it, extended periods of time? Is that just moving the case along the process, like investigation started, investigation closed, or is there like actual pertinent customer information in there too, transactions, or?
Yeah, so a lot of times I try and like refer back to the prior cases to see if there's any information that they filed on that I need to look into, or just did their prior transactions reflect my current transactions, to see like is there history, their pattern of like activity that is reasonable or unreasonable or anything like that. Also within our system, we have other links to other like banking tools. So I can look up like our locations, where they are. I can go to like the FinCEN website, stuff like that. So sometimes I need to go back into the case and pull up those tools. And I have to be logged in to pull up those tools. So that's
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So it's like a one-stop shop kind of system that you guys utilize?
yeah, kind of. Yeah.
That makes sense why it'd be so slow then on some days.
Yeah.
A lot of data in there.
The transactions that you said are you are elsewhere, but you have to go into that to click whatever link or button to get to the transaction viewing.
So we download our transactions through our main case management
Okay.
system.
Yeah.
But all of our files get uploaded into the case management system. So it's just helpful to go back in and like click on prior cases and their transactions. So we have to kind of be logged in to do that.
Yeah.
Or I'll look up prior like accounts, just to see if there were any prior SAR filings on them or cases. Sometimes that can be helpful in an investigation as well, especially if you have another account that gets alerted, or is sending or receiving a lot of funds. You can look into that prior case or account and see, have they been looked at by the bank in order to figure out if you need to add them to your review or not.
Yeah. This kind of goes back to the last question. It's intertwined, but something that I was thinking previously that I should probably get brought up. But so looking back at these previous investigations, and you're seeing the entire investigation as a whole and these 90-day reviews. Do you think, right, because a current thing right now is customers being de-risked by institutions? Do you think a lot of that plays into kind of, as you elaborated, like stuff just being filed just to be filed? The XYZ reasons, right? It's there's not enough time to actually determine if it's not out of pattern or unusual, right? So your deadline's coming up and you don't have sufficient evidence to say otherwise, that, okay, yeah, this is okay, this is expected normal activity. So do you think that plays a role into, people losing their accounts at institutions? And I have another part of that too after you respond.
It just, there's so many factors in that. I think I think the biggest thing is people don't include memos on anything. So it's so hard for us as investigators to figure out what the purpose of the funds is for. Cash, you really never know, but like checks and wires and Zelle specifically, like if they just included a memo, it would solve 90% of the cases would be no SARS. If a lot of the cases like Zells that I see, it's a lot of informal savings clubs that, people participate in, which is totally fine with our bank.
Yeah.
But if they don't include, Tonda or Susu, in their memo, it's just so hard for us to figure out why they're transacting with 50 different individuals for the same amount of money, if they're an individual,
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
there's a lot of red flags, right? And that's the thing is that that this industry is, you focus on the red flags and then you use what information you have available to you at that time to determine whether it is normal and expected or if it's something out of pattern or notable or that has to be reported on, right? So, Lauren, maybe you have some thoughts on memos, or our instance, it's more so like wire notes, right? That's pretty common amongst us.
Yeah, half the time, if it's like just a single wire with a personal account or something, if there were just to be like one note to say this is what it's for, you could clear it, because yeah, you end up spending, I don't know, 30 minutes trying to find a connection between them, and that's tough.
Yeah, and so a part of that, right, is a good investigator is likely going to focus on, depending on what you're looking at, what that alerting transaction is, or that transaction that you're questioning, right? So say it's a debit. If you can't find anything on that counterparty, but there's also not like any negative or adverse media, so then you're going to shift your focus to identifying what sourced that debit, right? So in your experience, if you get to that point and the source of funds appears to be legitimate and it's nothing notable, are you gonna escalate that, or inquire further, or you're gonna cut it right there and say, there's at this time, there's no available information that requires this to be reported or further investigated?
For us, if the source of funds is legitimate, we don't care what they do with their money.
Interesting. Now, vice versa, what about if it's a credit, and you have questions or concerns over the originator of those funds, but you can't quite identify anything out there on them, and maybe it's a high risk country or something, right? But then they seem to still use those funds for something legitimate. Is that the same scenario? It's like, okay, it's fine, or is that something you're gonna look into further? Like, I guess, how often would you send an RFI or inquire to the originating financial institution?
So it really depends on the scenario. So if the customer is sending a lot of funds to themselves from another banking institution, if I think they can source that money, then I will normally close it, but I'll send a 314B just to confirm that the source of funds is legitimate. But if I can't find a connection or a purpose for the funds that they're receiving, I will file just to be sure, just to be safe. And I want to clarify on that last point. If the source of funds is legitimate, I won't file unless they're structuring their cash withdrawals or something. That's the only time I'll file. But if their credits are suspicious, most likely we'll file on them just to be safe.
When
Yeah.
you say that if you think they can source it, do you mean like their occupation justifies like a high volume of large personal transfers or something?
Yeah, so if they're in the construction industry, like if they deposit a lot of cash,
Okay,
and
yeah.
if they're like, a roofer or something, then most likely it's okay because, roofing is a specialty trade, which often is cash intensive. But if they're a 19-year-old student, depositing $30,000 in cash, I'm gonna file, just
Yeah. So
there's a lot of different scenarios.
how often do you have additional customer information, KYC documents, additional due diligence outside of just CIP, right? Everybody's opening these accounts. They need to have, some sort of form of identification, a tax ID, social security number, first, last name, and typically a phone number or an email, right? So other than that, how much more information do you typically have available to you?
We don't get very much information. I acquire or try to acquire that information, like open source information. So through Google or LexisNexis, I pull a LexisNexis report for every client that alerts and or business that alerts. Just for me, it's can be super helpful, especially if they're transacting with family members or roommates, then I can go into their LexisNexis report and pull those names from that report and say, this is their connection, or this business is owned by this person. Sometimes even if the person is or business doesn't alert, I'll look them up as well just to see, what their industry might be or what their profession might be or where they live or stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's all good resources. But with the shift of online banking and not even in-person banking, right, at all, like there's a lot of financial technology companies, but even just banks in general that have shifted just completely online, right? So it's interesting, or it probably is going to be very interesting to see how it all plays out, because there's probably not a whole lot, if any, of that additional information that's being provided to these institutions, outside of the general CIP requirements to open an account. And like you said, if they're not doing memos and you don't really know what expected activity looks like, right? Then more likely than not, there's probably going to be a lot of SARS filed. But we all know, system generated alerts, based off transaction activity, it's close to like a nearly 0%, actual true hit for something that's out out of the ordinary or unusual. So um, that's when, you know, it's nice to have these additional customer information available to you. You know, who is John Doe, what is his occupation, um, you know, and it honestly, if they could tell you, you know, I live in you know, San Diego, California, and I have family in Mexico right across the border. So I will be doing a lot of, you know, international wires to family members. You know, something like that is like that could save the investigator a long time, and that'll likely eliminate a lot of these SAR filings. You know, because SAR filings have increased exponentially over the past couple of years, and it's like every time there's a new FinCEN report out, right, for the previous 3 months or the last month, and it's always like, oh, all-time high for this month ever, and then it's month after month, and that's where we're at this point. And then you have the whole de-risking of bank customers. And I'm curious to I don't know this, and I don't know if anybody even knows this, but you know, if information does come out, you know, where are these customers being de-risked from? Is it from traditional institutions, or is it from these newer, you know, online only institutions? So it's definitely interesting, and it'll only time will tell how it all plays out, and the shift of, you know, the way that money is moved. That's kind of a big thing.
Yeah, I agree. From my experience, I think a lot of the um, people are getting de-risked from actual, you know, banking institutions. I'm not sure how digital banks, how their exit process looks like, or what they focus on. I'm sure you might find out within this series, but I would be interested to know that as well.
Yeah. Lauren, any thoughts?
No, I don't really have any thoughts or opinions on that piece.
All right, awesome, awesome. Well, right on. We'll roll right on then to you know, question 5 here. You know, the other part of this show is to give information to other professionals in the industry or people seeking to get into the industry, you know, kind of knowledge of how you ended up where you're at currently, you know, what steps you took to get here, you know, were you just gifted this position? What did you do to get here? And what would you recommend to people that are looking to get into this industry?
Yeah, so I started with a staffing agency back in 2013, I believe. And I worked for about 10 months at also another large banking institution. We were more like a compliance analyst, but we just did transaction monitoring. And we were the ones just to kind of indicate if we saw suspicious activity or not. And then we would send it up to the actual analyst to do the SARS or the no SARS determinations. And then I kind of took a break for a while. And then I joined a consulting firm that has become a lot more popular now. But that is a great way to start, either in a staffing agency or consulting firm, just to get your foot in the door and also get introduced to a lot of other different banking institutions or other financial institutions like fintechs and like smaller like cryptocurrencies or, you know, anything, really anything. Just consulting firms will consult to anyone that needs their help. And most of those businesses are normally backlogged. So you'll get a lot of experience, either in a short amount of time or a long period of time. But you do get a lot of experience with multiple different agencies and institutions.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. Now, when you first got that staffing gig, did you have any education or like a secondary education, college, anything like that?
Yeah, they just wanted a bachelor's degree, and I believe it was like a degree in either finance, criminology, criminal justice, something similar. And so personally, I have my bachelor's, and my major was criminology. So that's kind of how I got in, and that's kind of what they were looking for.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty similar, to what I've came across or seen or heard. Actually, it's kind of funny because I feel like I stumbled across more people that have education degrees that have transitioned into this field, by way of going to this consulting firm or staffing agency, because a lot of these job prerequisites, yeah, it's a bachelor's degree, right? And then it'll say like preferred finance, accounting, forensic accounting, criminal justice, but yeah, at the end of it, it's just a bachelor's degree, right? Um, so I have came across quite a few people that have transitioned, or they never even actually got into teaching. They went and did it for like a quarter or a semester, depending on what type of level of education, and they're like, yeah, it's not for me. And then did a few other jobs from then to now, and then now they're into this field. So it's definitely interesting to hear everybody's path into this. Me personally, uh, I was in the military. Um, I went in straight out of high school. I got out, and then I pursued my higher education. I was still young, so like I was serving tables. I didn't really care about my future. I was just like, I'm going to school and I'm going to serve tables on the side. And then I got my undergrad, and then I thought I was ready to go out into the big world. And then I got a bunch of doors slammed in my face saying I don't have any experience, XYZ, things like that. So what I did, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go back to school, and I went and got my graduate degree. And at that time, I was like, okay, I need to try to get an internship or something. I got to start making connections, because uh, I know how this turned out last time. So then I started actually applying for all those things, and then I still was just not selected. They're difficult to get into, and it's even slimmer to get into one when you're in grad school, because a lot of these types of internships are for undergraduate students. Um, but so that's where it was, and then I knew I was trying to transition into the field. I just couldn't get in. I never worked in a bank, so if you're trying to work at a bank doing this, it's like almost impossible. Like they want you to have some sort of banking knowledge to get into this field. So but that's when I started networking, and that I never looked back since. Like that's why I'm here, FinCrime Insiders. I'm trying to hear what you're doing, Tanya. Trying to Lauren and I, we work together, but it's nice knowing her path to where she's at and stuff like that, and she can elaborate on it too. How she's got here, but. I think this is one of my more favorite topics of the show, is just hearing how people have gotten to the industry. And it's probably very similar each of the ways, but you never know. There may be a unique niche out there that we don't know about. And that's the whole point, right? Like, how do we get into this? Because if you ask people, they either never heard of it, or they're like, I can't ever get into it. So, but there's a lot of us, I mean, you go on LinkedIn, and there's hundreds of thousands of people that say BSA, AML, anti-money laundering, compliance, financial crimes. It's almost like everyone under the sun does this, but yet it's nearly impossible to get into it. So it's definitely interesting to hear how people have overcome those hurdles and landed where they're at.
I agree that networking is a big component to basically getting into this field, because I knew someone who told me about this. They were like, and I previously worked with them, and they were like, no, I know you don't think that you could do this job because it's at a bank, but you really can. It's investigations, because that's what my background is in, is investigations. And so I was like, I don't think I'd be able to work at a bank. I don't know what I would do. And they were like, no, it's the department. We investigate anti-money laundering. And I'm definitely glad I trusted them and took the leap into it. It's a neat career.
There's a lot of movement. Is there, any interest of, have you ever worked a fraud primary role at all, Tanya, or has it been AML focused the entire time?
I did some credit card fraud. Um, I want to say about 9 months. I was working for a client, um, doing credit card fraud, and I really enjoyed it actually.
Oh yeah,
Um, because unlike AML, it was more cut and dry.
yeah,
Um, because you know, people are dumb. I'm just gonna throw it out there. They will include their name and addresses on shipping labels and receipts. And so you know exactly who they are and where they live. Most of the time. So there's a lot of with that and in that space, you know exactly who you're filing on. So I really enjoyed that actually. That was a lot of fun.
yeah, yeah. So to that note, Lauren and I deal a little bit with fraud investigations in addition to the anti money laundering, but it's just a small portion, and it's mostly just to like file what's already been discovered or something like that. But yeah, it's very very cut and dry, right? Check fraud, card fraud, things like that. Um, Most of the time, these people are habitual offenders. You could probably pull up a LexisNexis, and you're like, oh, whoever they just washed this check and they put their name on it, and you pull them up LexisNexis, Clear, whatever database that you use, and oh, what do you know? They've been arrested for theft, identity theft, XYZ over and over again. They were just in jail, 6 months ago for this exact thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of theft, I want I had a really funny case a couple months ago where the guy got arrested for mail theft, and then um when I looked through his transactions, he was full-blown committing mail theft. So that was funny.
Yeah, yeah, it's nice. And uh, of course, in this industry, right? Before the post 9/11 BSA Act, all that, right? That was what this industry consisted of, was fraud investigations, right? There's very little BSA, anti money laundering in these institutions or whatever. So it's nice to note that all fraud is AML, but not all AML is fraud, right? So that's a good distinguisher. But typically, uh, the fraudulent activity is usually to try to get something illicitly, and it's typically some sort of form of money or monetary instrument or something that has value, right? And the way that they cash in on that is that they have to convert it to cash, right? At the end of it all, it's got to be converted to cash. So some people just literally go straight to the bank and try to convert it to cash right then and there, and it's turned away, right? Oh no, this is fraud, or this has been reported stolen, something like that. And then other people take a little bit more advanced approach, and they'll try to layer it, have somebody else go in there, deposit it, remote deposit it, using different accounts that are fraudulently obtained too, right? Account takeover, something like that. And there's much more schematically planned ways to do it too, but that's where the anti-money laundering comes into play. So um, it'll be nice to get some people with the fraud background on here too, talk a little bit about that. And it's a big industry, but thank you for taking the time to come on here, discuss your experiences, and what you're dealing with, and stuff like that. And Lauren, thank you for taking part of this, and being my co-host, and providing additional input, because I probably have the same perspective on a lot of these responses, so it's good to have your outside input as well.
Thanks.
I
And it was nice
appreciate
meeting you, Tanya.
Yeah, I appreciate being here, and it was nice meeting you guys. And I look forward to watching the series.
Yeah, as it plans out, hopefully it picks up steam here. But glad to have you on here, and you took, a leap of faith, trusted me, trusted Lauren to, put you on here, and none of us made a fool of ourselves. So I think we succeeded. Looking forward to everything else in the future. All right, and definitely don't forget, we all have a LinkedIn profile. You definitely go and connect, like, share everything with us on LinkedIn. I'm very active right now, so obviously to try to get you on to this show. So definitely, come and shoot a connection request with myself or Lauren or Tanya. It's always good to have people in this space that you can reach out to and talk about some stuff like this about. And finally, definitely don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment to FinCrime Insiders on YouTube. We have a website too, but that website will just redirect you to FinCrime Insiders on YouTube. But thank you all for listening in here. This is the conclusion of episode 1 of FinCrime Insiders.